1 2 1 2. Back again. The Not a Person podcast. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Got a controversial one today. It's intentionally controversial, I think, because the topic shouldn't be controversial, if that makes sense. Is that Canada right now, my country, we have a problem with immigration. And the problem isn't the immigrants. The problem isn't the people. It's the policy, and it's the government and corporate collusion that is taking place and being done in order to artificially keep wages suppressed in the country and artificially keep the cost of housing increased, because the government and the politicians and everything, they've backed themselves into a corner here where most wealthy Canadians, most upper middle class Canadians, their wealth is 100% tied into real estate. You take away their house or their multiple properties or their assets, and they got nothing. They've got maybe a couple $100,000 in the bank in savings in the stock market. The majority of their wealth is tied up in real estate, and that is a huge bubble. And in a country that up until a few years ago that was under 40 million people, all you needed to do was burst that bubble. To burst that bubble was build some more houses, because we have, infinite, might as well be infinite amounts of land for the number of people we have. And you build some more houses, and all of a sudden, these rich people, their wealth disappears, right? So how do you keep that propped up? Well, you bring in more people, because we ain't making enough babies, right? So that's what the government's done, and it's sort of a slap in the face to lower class, lower income Canadians, and it's also a sneaky trick pulled on the immigrants that they're bringing in, because they're bringing these people in with the promise of a good future and a good job, and realistically it's not there. They're coming in to take orders at Tim Hortons for $14 an hour and live crammed into an apartment and pay $600 in rent to have a single bed in a living room with 14 other people, So that's the lie being sold to them. They're coming in thinking that they can have an opportunity to have a better life, and frankly just getting a shit hand. And then for the people that live here, that were born here, that weren't born into wealth, they're faced with a ever growing gap between those that have and themselves. It becomes harder and harder to gain a salary, to get good money, to get good pay when you're competing against, just hordes of people that are being brought in to do jobs. You can't get experience. And I understand that these are low skill jobs, but that's where people start, right? And now you're having cases where companies are hiring office workers, like entry-level office jobs are being filled by these temporary foreign immigrants to work at ridiculously low wages doing data entry in Canada, which would be like a stepping stone for most people to enter that corporate ladder and at a university, whatever. That's how I got started, was doing data entry in a corporation, and that's how my career kind of progressed. And instead, that's being filled with these temporary foreign workers, and then they're being promised at the end of their work permit or whatever, they get citizenship. So who's that benefiting, right? Like, the only person benefiting is the corporation, who can get away with paying shit wages still, instead of paying people more money, which they need to do to work these jobs that they're having trouble filling, right? So they're having trouble filling these jobs after COVID, during COVID, because people realized that they actually had some kind of power in the job market, that the workers were the ones that generated revenue for a company, and people kind of realized that and started demanding to be fairly compensated. And with the rising cost of housing, needed to be fairly compensated in order to afford a place to live. So with that factored in, instead of companies and governments working together to pay Canadians a fair wage so they could afford housing and could afford to start a life and build a career, instead of doing any of that, they just import a bunch of ESLs from India. And that's why when you try to get something processed, it takes 2 weeks and it's done wrong and it's horrible. But they don't care, because they get to pay these people pennies, and these people are willing to work for pennies and live in shit conditions just to be out of India, because India is a shithole, right? So that's where we're at right now. It's just the government lying to people, lying to foreign people to import them into the country, and then lying to us that these people are coming here for opportunity. They're coming here to keep wages suppressed and keep housing values up. That's what it is, right? Like, we're being played by our government, and like actively hates us. And in addition to that, it's trying to grow a voting base so that it can stay in power, right? Because Canadian citizens that were born and raised here, the classic citizens, aren't going to vote for these people because they're nut jobs doing this. So you bring people in exchange for votes, essentially, to be like, hey, I hooked you up. You want to stay here, you got to vote for me. Otherwise, the next guy's going to deport you, right? So that's the play. It's insane. We're seeing our politicians actively ruining our country by bringing people in and forcing wages down and overcrowding it and putting strain on all the infrastructure. There's nothing built. There's no housing. There's no way to support these people. There's our healthcare is crumbling. It's an absolute nightmare, and it's all being done to line the pockets of a few corporations, because that's all Canada is. We're just like 8 banks and some telcos, wearing a top hat. That's our country, and some oil companies out in Alberta, right? So it's a joke. And what you're seeing on social media and whatever is, instead of people going after the government, I mean, right? Some people do. Some people attack Trudeau, and there's a huge anti-Trudeau movement, an anti-liberal movement, which I'm 100% behind. But you also see people attacking the people that are coming over, attacking immigrants and Indians and making fun of their culture and all that. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's their fault. They are being used and manipulated just as much as we are. They're victims in this just as much as we are. And we need a solution that involves sort of coming together to get rid of the politicians that are doing this, the governments that are doing this. Without a government, this wouldn't be happening. You couldn't do this. You couldn't import people to work for shit jobs to artificially keep wages low. It's insane. And corporations couldn't exist without governments backing them up and being their violence wing, their propaganda wing, their people wouldn't stand for this shit. Corporations are abjectly evil. They do evil things constantly, and we all kind of stand by and can't do anything about it because we're the ones that would go to jail if we fight against it, right? You see it with protests against oil pipelines. You see it with this Disney news that came out where they said they couldn't be sued for killing someone because they signed up for Disney Plus. You see it now with the temporary foreign workers scheme that Tim Hortons and banks and other fast food chains are all pulling off to bring people in, instead of raising minimum wage, instead of paying a fair wage, instead of, letting the market correct for itself, supply and demand, they're just bringing in a glut of people to work for garbage money so that they can keep raking in the profits. And it's gonna break soon. You can't run on like this forever. The country can't sustain this, and people, unfortunately, are breaking out into racism and xenophobia, and I think that's the wrong decision. I think the decision needs to be to break out into anti-government protests, and we need to sort of get rid of these monsters that think that they can manipulate and control us, and start to take our power back, recover our own agency. Humans are free. Why do we need to have someone telling us what to do? And why do we want to have governments dictating to us what we can and cannot do, and what is and isn't allowed, and how many people can enter the country, and who's allowed to be a citizen and who's not, and what the paths to citizenship are, and borders and all that shit. It's all made up. It's all fake. I don't know why people feel this need to invent some authority over themselves, whether it's a government or a god. Everyone wants to have a master. I don't know. It's weird. I don't want a master. I'm my own master. I'll make my own decisions and do what I want and fuck all the rest, right? And unfortunately, that can get me in trouble. But I guess that's what guns are for, right? You can get yourself out of trouble with a plate carry on a rifle. And I mean, we'll see. Things are getting interesting, and this country is getting a little spicy. I know Americans' politics and their stuff seems to be the headline grabbers, but we're sort of the quiet underdog when it comes to political movement. You saw it with the trucker protests over the vaccines, and I think you're going to see it in the next coming years with some blowback over immigration. And unfortunately, it will be racialized, I think, which I don't want. I don't want people to be targeted for their race or for their status or because they're immigrants. I want people to be targeted that are bringing in these people, that are lying to these people, that are manipulating these people and using them as tools to ruin the lives of ordinary Canadians. I want to see those people suffer. I don't want to see the people that are already suffering suffer more. But unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen. And God forbid you speak out on it because you get labeled a racist to say that you don't want more immigrants. It's not that I don't want more immigrants. It's that I want a sustainable number of immigrants. I don't want immigrants to be used as fodder for the corporate machine to grind up and keep wages down. I don't want immigrants to be used as value props for our bloated housing market. I want them to come here to get a better life, not to, be in a slightly better third world, which is what it's becoming, right? Like when you got 15 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment to go work at Tim Hortons, that's like a tick better than living in a slum in India. Yeah, they got clean drinking water and healthcare, but at this point, we don't know how long that's going to last. The strain on the system is kind of insane. But it's like you're coming from, abject, badness to slightly better badness. I think people need to be coming to the country for like an actual improvement in living standard, and we have to be able to provide that before we bring them in. You know, we're not responsible for lifting people up. Unfortunately, like, that's not our job, right? But I think if you're able to come and bring something to the table and get yourself out of your situation, you should be rewarded for that. You shouldn't be driving Uber and working at McDonald's and Tim Hortons and getting 3 hours of sleep in a cramped apartment just to have a roof over your head and clean drinking. Like, I honestly don't see the benefit. Like, it's a slight bump, but I know some people that have come over are going back because they realized they were lied to, and it's actually kind of worse over here. So who knows? Things are going to break out the way they will, but I think a reckoning is coming, and I think the problem with immigration is not immigrants, it's our fucking politicians. Fuck them. Till next time, Not a Person Podcast. Have a good one.